Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we have Michael McGruder, who's been on a couple times. We've talked about Miami football. We've talked a little about the ACC. And today we're going to be talking about our service academies, Army football, and Navy football. And Mike, it's great to have you on again. I'm really excited to talk some service academy ball. And, I know we talked about off camera and about just the programs in general and just how passionate you are about them in general.
Thanks for having me on again, Rob. Yeah, it's a unique kind of situation at these service academies, and the fact that they are able to find success really is a testament to both the academy's spirit as well as the opportunity that comes with football.
Exactly. And, we talked about a little bit about this off camera too, but, Jeff Monken is one of those guys that is he's just super passionate about the program. He's just a great example and somebody that just kind of exemplifies what it means to really play Army football in general. I watched an interview with him with Adam Brenneman, and he talks about, doubling down on the triple option like he did last year with Bryson Daly and having all that success that they've had. So with that said, you look at this Army team that's coming off winning an AAC championship, and you look at their schedule as well, and I'd say all things considered a softer schedule once again, something that they can definitely build off of. So in terms of this Army team, who are some players that everyone should keep their eye out for, and what's your overall outlook for this program?
Well, I first of all, let's give our kudos again to Jeff Monken. The ability to turn a program that floundered and struggled for a very long time, and he's now heading into, I believe, his 12th season. He has a winning record over those 12 years. Is really a testament to both his character and his leadership. They have to replace Bryson Daly, who accounted for 32 touchdowns last year. I believe that led the country. So it's tough when you're missing your leader on the field. I know he battled some illnesses and some injuries in the middle of the year, but they're gonna be lining up behind a new starting quarterback in Dewayne Coleman, we believe. He's a senior. He's the one who replaced Bryson last year. And he's got a high bar to follow, but at least they have the pieces behind him from last year's very successful AAC championship team to help him, get his feet in those first couple games and understand what needs to happen. I believe they play Kansas State in a pretty marquee game for them in week 2 or 3, and that'll be a big test to see where this Army team is. They were very successful last year against non-Power Five opponents. So, with that being said, having an early test in the season will be a very good thing for them to kind of gauge where they fall in the year.
Yeah, and especially too, you brought up Dwayne Coleman. That's definitely a huge positive too. Just given, hey, you don't have to tweak the offense too much with Dwayne Coleman's skill set in general. He's someone who's experienced, someone who's super quick, understands the system. And you brought up Kansas State too, who I think is going to be one of the favorites in the Big 12 this year, especially
hmm
when you think about Avery Johnson, for example, who I think is going to be one of the best up and coming quarterbacks. I mean, he's only a sophomore, but given until his senior year, I think he's somebody we're going to be talking about too. And especially given that they are playing a Power Five school this early, it will definitely be a good example of exactly what you said, where they're at and kind of where they go from there. Just considering that they there are going to be some groups that you are a little bit concerned about. However, it's not a super young team. There are a lot of experienced guys on this team who have the potential to be breakout stars on this team, depending on how everything works out.
Absolutely. They're still bringing back their top two slot backs in Noah Short and Hayden Reed. They combined for 157 touches last year for 1,157 yards and 7 TDs. And so you almost expect them to get a little more going for themselves next year. And he's got two linemen coming back who are all conference. And they still have experienced rotated guys from last year's team to fill out that offensive line and kind of surround him with what he needs to be successful.
Yeah, and especially too, I mean, Kanye Udoh, he transferred to Arizona State, and he was probably going to be one of the biggest vocal points, if not the biggest vocal point of their rushing attack this year. So, with that said, with him moving on to Arizona State, who are some other playmakers that you anticipate stepping up into that role, or do you think it's going to be more of a by committee sort of thing where they're going to be relying on multiple guys to really kind of piece together his productivity?
I think, like I said, it's going to be those two guys. They didn't really throw very much last year, so I'm not sure there's going to be a difference maker on the outside for them. So it's going to be, and they doubled down on previous years where, like you said, we're going to go harder into the triple option instead of spreading it out like so many teams do these days. And so I think they're going to compact themselves. They're going to rely on their line to push and create the holes that's going to need. And then he just has to make the right decision on whether he wants to keep or pitch.
Yeah, and especially too, you brought up the offensive line a couple of seconds ago, and we can talk all day about how they're undersized, it's whatever, but at the end of the day, all their entire offensive line, I believe, is coming back this season too, which is another optimistic reason to say you know what, Army's going to be okay this year and figure it
Hmm.
out.
Yeah, it'll be good. Like you said, they're bringing back enough people, and with their level of schedule, and then the defense is still returning a lot of very good players, including Andon Thomas and Casey Larkin, who were difference makers for them there. That should help in forcing the team into some wins that maybe that shouldn't be as close as it was.
Yeah, and especially too when I think about 2024 Army, the one thing that I think I'm a little intrigued about in terms of them defensively is how does Army's defense stack up against a team who is really strong offensively, right? Because last
Mm,
year you can probably argue one of the strongest offense that they played last year was North Texas with Chandler Morris, who just transferred to Virginia. So when I look at the
hmm
schedule and I say to myself, hey, they're going to face a really strong passing team such as Kansas State with Avery Johnson, and then you go down a little bit further, and you also play Texas San Antonio towards the end of the year too, who I think is going to be probably another favorite in terms of the AAC. So I think that's going to be another big test for this Army defense, and I think something that I think is probably going to be a little bit more scrutinized as we get to October, November, etc.
Yeah, and like you said, I think glad you brought up UTSA because they are a little bit of a dark horse team that could be they're returning plenty of players that could factor in this conference. It's the AAC is kind of like the Wild West. You never know what team's going to step up and be contending. No one saw Navy or Army being where they were last year. I think they were both only projected for 6 wins, and both teams had 10. So anything could happen, but right now you kind of want to rely on the production that comes from in the repeated success that you see at a team like Army. They're used to their special rules. They only get a guy for 4 years. You don't get to use scholarships. They're already being paid by the U.S. government. So you're usually ready to replace players when their 4 years are up. You know it's coming. So it almost helps that you have to be ready to recruit in advance. And Jeff Monken's been doing this, 12 years. He knows what he's seeing. He knows who he wants and how to get them.
Yeah, and especially too, you talked a couple seconds ago about how at least for the decade before Monken was here, that Army football was just pretty dreadful in general, at least statistically speaking. And now we're at the point now where this is probably the most we've ever talked about Army football in general. And even this year, for example, if they did the updated playoff where eventually it ends up becoming 12 teams, Army would have been in the playoff last year because they would have
Yeah.
been. So that's a testament to where they've gotten, and especially even just Army flirting within the top 25 at all. It's definitely something that needs to be pointed out more and recognized.
hmm They they are a good team. There's always one service academy that's usually lurking right around that top 25. And I know we talked about it off camera, but these three schools are recruiting the same players at all times. They all have the same pool of players. They have very strict requirements in order for you to get into the school in the first place. They're looking for high leadership guys because these guys aren't just playing football. They're going to lead our nation's military and other soldiers. So they're looking for a certain cream of crop people. On top of that, they have to be athletic. And so usually one of the academies is lurking around it. I know Navy with Keenan Reynolds was finishing the top 20 a couple times. Malcolm Perry did it for them. Army's kind of having their period of success here where they're always flirting with it. I think a couple years ago they pushed Oklahoma to a 5 overtime game. So they have the ability to play with these big teams and playing their offense. makes it very hard. Teams have to spend a whole week focusing on how to stop it, and then come back the next week and have to play regular offenses again. I say regular, but spread out offenses, and it messes with you mentally. That there's been times where teams drop games after playing one of the service academies because they're so focused on stopping it.
Yeah, and especially too, at least last season in 2024, Army averaged about 31 points a game, and especially defensively, which I'll ask you in a second, and something I don't think they get enough credit for. They only surrendered about 15 and a half points last season, which was fourth in the country, and definitely something that they don't deserve, that definitely do deserve some more credit for that. So with that said, who are some of those guys that you say to yourself, okay, these guys are going to step up and be some serious contributors for Army defense, who I think is going to have a lot of returning production and be just as strong as last season?
Absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there's the linebacker and Don Thomas and the safety Casey Larkin. They combined themselves for 10 tackles for loss, 14 run stops, 6 interceptions, and 5 pass breakups. Those guys are just lurking around the ball every chance they can. And like we said, with an uh, run-based offense like Army's, they're holding the ball for a long time. That'll keep your defense fresh. That'll let them play at 100% for longer than other teams, and I think that really had an effect in, like you said, their 15 and a half points a game allowed, that they were able to go full speed for longer, take not taking any plays off. I know some of that number was skewed too when they played Notre Dame and it wasn't a very close game. That pushed that points allowed number up pretty high. But relative to that, they were athletic and they were moving fast, playing fast. Defense was simple, see ball, hit ball for them. And I think that really helped the team come together.
Yeah, and you brought up another good point. This isn't just happening in 2023 and 2024 like some novice fans might think. This has been a pretty consistent thing that Army's consistently been good on defense. They're in 2015, the most points they gave up were 23 points per game, and they haven't had a number anywhere close to that since then. So it's just
Hmm.
a testament to you know to the players that they've been able to bring in, the development that they've had, and sticking with the core that has made them successful over the past couple seasons now, and winning their first ever conference championship in the inaugural AAC conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we mentioned with the recruiting, you you're only getting players who want to be there. Okay, it takes a special person to go to one of these academies, and they want to be there knowing that they probably will not be a professional athlete, that this is the last chances they will get to play football, and they're going to love it. They play with love.
Exactly, and we'll talk about this in a second too when we talk about Navy, but just the Army Navy matchup every year. I mean, it's just one of those games where you get the chills whether you're in the stadium or whether you're on TV and you hear the national anthem, you hear the planes go over the stadium, and you just hear the passion, the enthusiasm, and all the veterans who have all their stories about their history and their experience with the team as well.
Absolutely. And to any fans out there, if you're ever given the opportunity, I recommend 100% you go to that game. I went to the one in East Rutherford, New York, and it was a fantastic game. Sold out. I think it was a 14-10 game, but just the energy that both student bodies provide, because the entire student body travels to the game, and you feel the energy and you can see how much these games mean to these players, and they're just little traditions intertwined throughout the game that it matters, and you can feel it matter to each student body.
Exactly, and it's just so special too, and you just kind of have to soak it all in, and I really do appreciate still that with all the ever changing things of college football that they still keep that week just for the academies too, because that was one of the biggest things I was worried about when they were changing the schedules around, is that they were just going to make the Army Navy game like any other game, and it really does deserve its own week, its own recognition, and keeping that
Hmm.
tradition alive as best as we can.
Absolutely. I mean, there aren't many other schools where the common refrain around the campus is either beat Army or sink Navy, and that you're automatically united with one of those whenever you're on campus. It's really a truly special environment. They're kind of like brothers, right? I can beat up on my brother, but if anyone else says anything about my brother, I no, you're not allowed to do that.
Exactly. If I beat up on my little brother, I don't want anyone else doing it. Even though now he can probably throw me around now, but it
Hmm.
was fun for the first 15 years of my existence. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, when you let this is the last question, I'll ask you to kind of wrap up this segment. But when you look at this Army schedule, I know we talked about Kansas State a couple seconds ago. And we talked about Texas, San Antonio. Are there any other games that kind of stick out to you that you say to yourself, hey, this can be a little bit more challenging than people might give them credit for, or just overall in terms of how their schedule is lining up, that this could be a momentum game or a game that could kind of sneak up on them?
You know, there's always a game or two, and it's tough when your quarterback is taking hits every single game that he's more likely to get hurt. So there's always a game somewhere in there that can kind of, like I said, sneak up on you and you drop one you don't expect to. Right now, I mean, they're at Tulane. That could be an interesting game for them. And versus Tulsa, I mean, I think Tulsa has a real chance as they get ready for that UTSA game and then ending with Navy that you can overlook that. And so it's one of those things that I'm sure, and Jeff Monken is a very good leader. He'll try to keep his guys locked in, but these are still kids, 18 to 21, and you start looking ahead to the more challenging games, thinking, we got this one, no problem. And it's a game that could sneak up on them very easily.
Yeah, because Tulsa's been rebuilding for the past couple seasons, and this could be the first season where I say to myself, "Hey, if they get a couple breaks, they can possibly get to that 5 to 7 win range, especially towards the end of the season, where they might be able to play spoiler towards Army and Navy too." And fortunately, they should do pretty solid versus the East Carolinas of the world, the UABs, the Charlottes, who are all,
Hmm.
I would argue, rebuilding. And maybe that November 8th game versus Temple. I know Casey Kessler is the head coach there now. He's with Sam Houston and won a bunch of FCS championships. So who knows? Maybe they'll give them a run for their money too.
Absolutely, it always has a real chance. And like I said, health will determine it. And I know Navy last year lost their superstar Blake Horvath for a game against ECU, and for a while it was tight in a game that really shouldn't have been. So that's all it takes is one guy to go down, and you don't have the same, production, and turns into a battle.